If you all somehow don't remember December, we recently had the pleasure of revisiting the Sinnoh region, which is threatened by the troublesome Team Galactic. So in today's video, I want to get a better look at the leader of Team Galactic, Cyrus, and see how strong he really is. I'll be breaking down his teams from Diamond and Pearl, Platinum, Ultra Sun and Moon, and BDSP, in an effort to see if Cyrus really is worthy of leading the evil team. With all that out of the way, let's get started with Cyrus's team in Diamond and Pearl. Starting off, let's take a look at Cyrus's team in Diamond and Pearl. This team consists of Gyarados, Crobat, Honchkrow, and Weavile. The first thing that's pretty obvious is how weak Cyrus is to electric and rock types. Weavile is the only Pokemon here that isn't weak to electric type attacks. However, they all succumb to rock attacks. His Pokemon's ability to combat these weaknesses aren't that great either, with Gyarados being the only one with a ground move to take on both electric and rock types, and being arguably the absolute worst Pokemon to do so with that glaring 4x weakness to the electric type. The only other Pokemon to have coverage against major threats to this team would be Honchkrow with Steel Wing,
as well as Weavile with Brick Break.
But that's not nearly enough to be called decent protection. It also has to be mentioned that these mons are primarily physical attackers, so if you manage to get a burn off on any of them or just have a nice physical wall, there isn't much Cyrus can do to you. So yeah, the obstacles his team faces there, along with the weaknesses to electric and rock, make Cyrus look kind of like a chump when it comes to being an evil team leader. Now, of course, this is all under the assumption you only use electric and rock type Pokemon that take Cyrus on instead of Pokemon that just happen to have that kind of coverage. As I've said in plenty of my Sinnoh related videos, electric types aren't really useful for the majority of your Sinnoh adventure, so I usually steer clear of using them on my teams. As for the rock types, well, they're pretty garbage in Sinnoh. They're either weak with no diversity in their move pool to speak of, or they're also ground types, making them a detriment to your team. So whether Cyrus is challenging or a piece of cake really depends on what Pokemon you're bringing to the fight, as these four mons are pretty solid on paper. But even the most casual player with just a little bit of knowledge about Cyrus before the final battle will just cruise to victory, no problem at all. Now, when it comes to his Platinum team, some things change, but they mostly stay the same. His new team adds a Houndoom while keeping his Gyarados, Honchkrow, Weavile, and Crobat. Now, obviously, the addition of Houndoom adds another Pokemon in addition to his Weavile that won't get screwed by electric type attacks, so that's one positive. The fact that it's also a fire-type special attacker with Will-O-Wisp makes it an extra obstacle to those that wish to burn his Pokemon into physical attackers hurling damage his way. But that's all Houndoom can bring to the table. As we've discussed, Houndoom is a decent fire type, but it's not an amazing one. Speaking of which, being a fire type means that it is also weak to rock type attacks, continuing this trend of just being able to obliterate Cyrus with a nice rock slide. I suppose there are some adjustments to the team that definitely make it a bit better than his Diamond and Pearl team. Honchkrow, while losing its coverage to rock types, has gained some pretty strong moves in Psychic and Heat Wave, making it slightly more intimidating, but still easily beatable. Crobat switches out Bite for Toxic, which probably helps it out a little bit more in the long run, but is definitely not substantial enough to be called a major improvement. But then we actually have an offensive change here, with Weavile dropping Brick Break in favor of
Fake Out.
Like, Weavile was still probably going to get its butt kicked if they just kept it the same, but
Fake Out.
Really? This team, for the most part, made some decent refinements, but ultimately just ended up being as bad as it was in the original games. With that said, let's move on to some real interesting teams. Next up, we have Cyrus's teams for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. These teams are virtually identical, having Houndoom, Honchkrow, Weavile, and Crobat, with the obvious exception of Dialga and Ultra Sun versus Palkia and Ultra Moon. Without making you guys wait all the way till the end of this section, I'll just come out and say it now. This is by far Cyrus's best team in the series, hands down. From the perspective of lore, it makes sense considering that this Team Rainbow Rocket version of Cyrus is one that accomplished his goal of controlling either Palkia or Dialga in his efforts to create the new world that he desired. Now, for the most part, the majority of his Pokemon do resemble his previous Sinnoh teams in terms of the moves they have, with a few exceptions here and there. Of course, there are different moves on these Pokemon, with a lot of them being more diverse in terms of coverage. However, I don't believe this coverage actually helps them out all that much. For instance, putting Shadow Ball on Houndoom just makes zero sense, and they should have instead kept something like Thunder Fang or Will-O-Wisp on it, like in previous movesets. It should be pretty obvious, but of course, the stars of these teams have to be Palkia and Dialga. Both Pokemon feature Thunderbolt and Earth Power, with the other two being filled up by stab coverage. I'd say Cyrus's team in Ultra Moon with Palkia is definitely the better of the two, and having Palkia makes the team less weak to fighting and also still having coverage for rock and electric types, despite not resisting them like Dialga. Of course, some of the Pokemon he chooses to use here are still questionable, especially with some of the moves that are on them. But out of everything we've seen so far, this is undoubtedly his best team. However, I'd say in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to evil team leaders, Cyrus is still severely lacking. And now we can move on to Cyrus's most recent appearance in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. As we all know by now, these games are pretty much one-for-one remakes. But I do say pretty much, as they do have some actual solid differences between the originals. The big thing here, obviously, being that every single Pokemon has a held item on it. And not just his Weavile. These aren't just random held items either. They're actually pretty good in making his team seem somewhat viable. I mean, Gyarados has a Wackenberry on it, Honchkrow with the Scope Lens, Weavile with the Chopley Berry, and finally Crobat having Quick Claw. When you hear just that, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that bad. But then you get to the movesets. Aside from his Gyarados, these aren't the greatest he could use moveset-wise. I mean, Weavile is really getting the short end of the stick here with Fling as an option. Honestly, the items being on all of his Pokemon are the only things that are keeping this team on par with his regular Diamond and Pearl team as his worst team. A lot of that being due in part to Honchkrow just being able to get free crits on you with that Scope Lens / Air Cutter / Night Slash combo. For the most part, I really do like this team, but I really just wish they could get the moves right on them. I think this would have by far made it his best team without a legendary on it. Lastly, I'm going to briefly go over Cyrus's team in the manga, as I feel it's worth talking about, and the fact that he doesn't really have any anime teams to speak of. This team consists of Honchkrow, Probopass, Magnezone, Weavile, and Gyarados. On the surface, while this team is extremely weak against fighting types, it's actually pretty good and has strong options with it. A good example of this is Probopass, genuinely saving the team as a still trapper to help mons like Weavile and Honchkrow. Magnezone also can cover this role, to be fair, but Probopass definitely has better coverage than what you would typically get with steel types. Without taking game mechanics into account, this definitely has to be his second best team overall when you just look at the Pokemon, only losing out to his Ultra Sun and Moon teams, which is obvious as he owns two very powerful legendaries. That said, this is a close second, and a team that would have been really interesting to see be used in-game. So overall, what's my verdict? Well, in short, Cyrus stinks. He has plenty of great options at his disposal, but never seems to quite hit the mark, except of course in the Ultra games. And even there, he's only doing well because of having access to solid legendary Pokemon. Now, would I say he's the weakest of the evil team leaders? Definitely not, but I think this just hurts so much more because the potential is there on multiple occasions, like with BDSP giving really solid held item options, and Usum having mostly decent movesets on his Pokemon. I don't know when's the next time we'll be able to see Cyrus again. If you watched my recent theory video, it could possibly be sooner than you think. But whenever that fateful day is, I genuinely hope Cyrus has learned some lessons over the last decade and a half and chooses to make a change. If he did, maybe he'd be able to accomplish his goals more easily. Well, that wraps up my thoughts on how strong Cyrus is. What did y'all think? People really love Sinnoh, but I feel this isn't that hot of a take. Cyrus always seemed delusional with his grandiose goals, and just could never back them up in the end. What a sad, sad man. If he wasn't so crazy, I'd actually feel bad for him. Hey guys, thank you for enjoying another Mystic Umbreon video. It's exciting times for the Pokemon franchise, and I look forward to the coming months where it just keeps getting better. If you guys are wanting some more bite-sized Mystic Umbreon content, please check out my TikTok, where I upload daily, as well as the Mystic Umbreon Shorts channel. If y'all enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Be sure to leave a comment too. It really helps us out. I think it's time to wrap this up though. I'm Mr. Gumbrion, and I'll see you next time with some more amazing Pokemon content.